Say my name. A Hood Eloquence original story. Prologue, the message. There is a particular kind of loneliness that lives inside of a full life, the kind that does not announce itself at dinner parties or in board meetings, but waits, patient and merciless, for the hush of a Tuesday night when the wine is open and the apartment is too quiet and a woman who has held herself together for years simply does not want to hold anymore. Lana Zelle was that woman on a Thursday. She was sitting cross-legged on her living room floor, her back against the base of the couch she had picked out alone, in the apartment she had decorated alone, in a life she had been rebuilding from rubble quietly, steadily, without asking anyone for help. A half-empty bottle of red wine stood on the coffee table in front of her, and the city glittered beyond her floor-to-ceiling windows like it had no idea what was happening inside her. Desmond Lance had not called. Not tonight, not yesterday, not in the 3 days since she had left his voicemail unanswered. This was the game he played, the disappearing act followed by the grand reappearance, all warm hands and low voice, and I was just giving you space, baby. She had come to know the rhythm of him the way you know a storm pattern, by the pressure in your chest before it arrived. She had been with him for 7 years. 7 years she had called his silences patience. 7 years she had called his grip on her wrist firmness. 7 years she had called the fear that lived in her stomach love, because what else do you call something that enormous, something that takes up that much space inside of you? The wine was warm by the time she reached for her phone. She did not mean to scroll to the wrong name. Or perhaps some part of her, the part that had been watching, cataloging, noticing, meant it exactly. Donte Brown. She stared at his contact for a long time. 8 years of Thursday morning briefings and red-eye flights and conference room silences and coffee orders memorized and small moments passed between them like folded notes. 8 years of being the most capable, most invisible person in the room. 8 years of not one mistake. She typed before she could stop herself. I'd give anything to hear you say my name. She sent it. Then she set the phone face down on the carpet and pressed her fingertips to her closed eyes and breathed like a woman who had just done something irreversible. Because she had. She had cracked the 8-year seal, crossed the 8-year line, and sent a message into the dark that she could not take back. The phone lit up at 2:17 in the morning. She almost did not look. And then she looked. One message. 3 words. No punctuation, no qualifier, no professional distance at all. Lana. Say it? She pressed the phone against her chest and stared at the ceiling and felt something shift, tectonic and slow and completely undeniable, in the architecture of her life. Part 1. The Architecture of Distance. Chapter 1. What 8 years looks like. The offices of Brown Meridian Group occupied the top 3 floors of a building on South Wacker Drive that Donte had designed before he was 32. The building was all dark glass and clean vertical lines, and it caught the Chicago light in a way that made it look like it was always on the edge of saying something significant. Which was, most people who knew him agreed, a very Donte Brown kind of building to own. Lana arrived at 7:45, same as always. She wore a charcoal-wrapped dress and her locks were pinned at the crown with a clip she had owned since graduate school, copper-threaded, heavy, shaped like a crescent. She carried 2 coffees and a leather portfolio and her composure like armor, and she moved through the lobby like a woman who had never sent a wine-drunk message to her employer at midnight. She had considered not coming in. She had considered resigning by email. She had considered moving to another city. She had considered, briefly and dramatically, changing her name and taking up goat farming somewhere in Vermont. Then she had showered, dressed, and reminded herself that she was Lana Adiz Zelle, and Lana Adiz Zelle did not run from embarrassment. She walked through it, spine straight, chin level, face giving nothing away. The elevator opened on the 38th floor. Donte was already there. He was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window at the end of the hall with his back to her, his hands in the pockets of slate-gray trousers, the city spread out below him like something he was considering purchasing. He was 6'2", built like a man who had played ball in college and never quite stopped, with a face that his assistant of 8 years had spent considerable effort not looking at directly for reasons she had never fully examined until last night. He turned when he heard her. Lana, he said. And the way he said it, soft and deliberate and full of something she had never heard him put into her name before, hit her somewhere below the sternum. She kept walking toward his office. Good morning. You have a 9 o'clock with the Holden Group and a 12:30 with Senator Bennett's office. The Johannesburg materials are on your desk. I've also... Lana. She stopped. She had to stop. The way he said it the second time made stopping involuntary, like a hand on her arm, like a current run through the floor. She turned and faced him. He was looking at her the way she had sometimes caught him looking at her when he did not think she was paying attention, direct and unguarded and weighted with something she had always filed away as her imagination. He was not filing it away now. I want to talk about last night, he said. It was the wine, she said immediately. I apologize. It was completely. I've been wanting to say your name like that for 8 years. The lobby sounds. The elevator bell somewhere. The distant percussion of a city going about its morning. All of it fell away. Lana looked at Donte Brown, really looked, the way she had been not looking for nearly a decade, and said nothing for a very long time. We have a 9 o'clock, she finally said. Something moved through his face. Not disappointment exactly, closer to patience. As if he had waited 8 years and could manage a few more hours. Then let's go to the 9 o'clock, he said, and gestured toward his office with one hand, and she walked past him close enough that she could smell the cedar and clean cotton of him, and she kept her face very, very still. Mac Nelson from operations brought her a Danish she hadn't asked for around 10:30 and set it on her desk with the specific casualness of a man delivering an apology on someone else's behalf. Mr. Brown asked, Mac said, by way of explanation. Lana looked at the Danish. Almond. Her favorite. Which Donte had known since year 2. Tell him thank you, she said. Mac nodded and left, and she looked at the pastry for a long time before she picked it up and ate it standing at her desk, looking out at the Chicago skyline, thinking about what it meant that the man she had worked beside for 8 years knew that she loved almond pastries, knew that she took her coffee with oat milk and no sugar, knew that she got cold in conference rooms and always needed the seat closest to the heating vent, knew all the small, accumulated facts of her that Desmond had never once bothered to learn. She thought about Desmond then, and the familiar heaviness settled back into her chest. Not love anymore, she knew that now, but something more like a weather pattern she had not yet learned to predict from the inside. He would be watching. He was always watching. She did not know yet how much. Chapter 2. The Geometry of Donte Brown. There were things about Donte Brown that his board knew, that the financial press knew, that the city of Chicago knew in the way cities know their successful sons. That he had built Brown Meridian from a 2-person consulting firm into a multinational development and investment company worth north of $400 million. That he was 41 years old. That he sat on 3 philanthropic boards, had given the commencement address at his alma mater twice, and wore his success the way certain men wear good suits, naturally, without performance, as though it were simply his shape. What fewer people knew, what almost no one knew, was that Donte Brown had been in love with his assistant since the morning she walked into his office carrying a folio of his scattered project notes that she had organized, categorized, and cross-referenced overnight, set them on his desk, and said, with the economy of someone who did not speak to impress, I found 17 inefficiencies in your client management system. I've drafted solutions for all 17. Which would you like to implement first? He had looked up from those notes and found her 5'9", locks brushing her shoulders that first day, copper gold skin, dark eyes that were already moving on to the next thing as though his answer were largely a formality. And something in his chest had shifted with the particular gravity of a tectonic event. He had said, all of them. She had said, I'll have timelines to you by Friday. And that had been the beginning of 8 years. 8 years during which he had learned every preference and pattern of her. 8 years during which he had watched her arrive early and leave late and handle crises with the stillness of someone who had survived far worse things than crises. 8 years during which she had gotten with Desmond Lance, a fact that Donte had received with the controlled composure of a man accustomed to not having the things he wanted, and had slowly, over the subsequent years, become someone slightly dimmer than herself. He had noticed. He had noticed everything. He had noticed the first time she flinched when her phone rang if she was in the middle of telling him something. He had noticed the way she answered Desmond's calls with her whole body going careful, voice modulated, posture adjusted, the animated Lana folded back inside the controlled one. He had noticed the shadow that sometimes passed through her eyes when she spoke about her weekend, and the way she had stopped speaking about her weekends altogether. He had wanted to ask. He had not asked, because she had not offered, and because Lana Zelle's privacy was a thing he had always respected with the seriousness he gave to structural load-bearing walls. You did not remove them without being very certain about what might fall. But when her message came through at 12:04 in the morning, when I'd give anything to hear you say my name appeared on his screen, and he sat up in the dark of his bedroom with his heart doing something it had not done in years, he understood that she had finally cracked open a door. And Donte Brown was, above all else, a man who understood the architecture of opportunity. Chapter 3. The Weight of Desmond Lance. He drove a black Dodge Charger with department plates he was not supposed to use for personal errands. He had been a detective with the 18th District for 11 years, long enough to know which favors to call in and which ones to bank, long enough to have developed the particular confidence of a man who understood how systems work from the inside. Desmond Lance was not stupid. That was the most important thing to understand about him. He was organized, methodical, and possessed of an intelligence. He used the way certain people use money, not to build things, but to maintain leverage. He knew exactly where Lana lived. He knew her route to work. He knew the building she worked in, knew that her office was on the 38th floor, knew the names of 3 of her colleagues because he had looked them up with department resources he was not supposed to use for personal matters. He told himself this was love. He had told himself this for 7 years, had built an entire internal architecture of justification. She needs looking after. She doesn't always make the best choices. I know her better than she knows herself, and the architecture was so solid, so load-bearing, that he could not see from the inside how much of it was about control and how little of it was about her. What was making him unravel, slowly and then quickly, was that she was healing. He could see it in the set of her shoulders when he drove past the building in the mornings. Could see it in the way she answered her phone differently now, less careful, less modulated, as though she were no longer editing herself for an audience. She was becoming more fully herself, and this terrified him in a way he translated as anger, because anger was the only language he trusted. He did not know about the message yet. He would. Chapter 4, Trip 1, Nairobi. The trip to Nairobi came 2 weeks after the message, packaged inside Brown Meridian's existing calendar as though it had been arranged for professional reasons alone, and it had been, technically. Donte was meeting with the Singh Foundation about a sustainable housing development project spanning 4 East African cities, and Lana had managed the correspondence, scheduled the meetings, arranged the flights, and booked 2 rooms at the Hemingway's Nairobi with the same precision she applied to everything. She had not addressed the message again. Neither had he. This was the particular tension of them, this practiced, mutual restraint. They had always communicated in a register slightly below the surface of the professional. A coffee placed at the exact right time. A briefing note that anticipated a question before it was asked. A look across a conference table that said more than either of them had the language for. They had conducted an entire emotional education in this subterranean space, and now the ground above it was beginning to feel less stable. The flight was 14 hours. Lana slept for 6 of them in the seat beside his, her locks loose around her face, one hand open on the armrest between them. And Donte spent portions of those 6 hours watching the city lights dissolve below the clouds and not sleeping and being very honest with himself. He was in love with her. Had been in love with her for 8 years. Had managed this love the way you manage a chronic condition, with discipline and routine and the occasional difficult night. He was done managing it. He was not going to rush her. Whatever had happened with Desmond, and he knew enough from the architecture of her changed behavior to understand that it had been worse than she had told anyone. She needed space to be whole on her own terms. He would not become another man who decided what she needed without asking. But he was also not going to pretend anymore. Nairobi was green and golden and full of light in a way that felt like the city had its own particular frequency. Their meetings were productive. The Singh Foundation representatives were sharp, visionary, and arrived with their own detailed proposals, which Lana had anticipated and prepared counter-proposals for, to the barely concealed astonishment of everyone in the room. On the second evening, after the last dinner with the Foundation's lead liaison, a woman named Vera Jo who wore orange like she invented it and had twice the energy of everyone else at the table. Donte and Lana ended up on the hotel terrace with glasses of Kenyan red wine and the city spread below them. "You've never told me," Donte said, after a long silence that had been comfortable the way their silences always were. "Told you what? Why you took the job? 8 years ago. You had 3 other offers. I had your file pulled, I know you had 3 other offers." She was quiet. "Then, your building." He turned his head. "The building you designed on South Wacker. I walked past it the morning before my interview, and I stood there, and She shook her head slowly, looking out at the Nairobi skyline. It looked like someone had said exactly what they meant. No hedging, no decoration. Just the truest form of the idea. I decided if the man who built that building was also the man running the company, I wanted to work for him." Donte was quiet for a long time. "I designed that building," he said, trying to be as honest as I could be in concrete and glass. "Because I was not being very honest about most other things at the time." She looked at him now. "What were you being honest about?" The city hummed below them. A warm wind came off somewhere distant and moved through her locks, and he watched it happen and said, very quietly, "You really want me to answer that?" She held his gaze. For 8 years she had not held his gaze this long, had always found some professional reason to look away at the critical moment. She did not look away now. "Yes," she said. "I want you to answer that." "I wasn't being honest," Donte said, "about how I felt about the woman who was about to walk through my door and change every system I had and look at me like I was mostly a formality while doing it." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. 8 years, she said. 8 years, he confirmed. She looked back out at the city, and he watched her think, could actually see her thinking, the small movements of expression across her face that he had learned to read the way musicians read notation. "I'm not in a good place," she said finally. "I need you to know that. I've been surviving something, and I'm not finished surviving it, and I'm not." "I know," he said. He said it the way you say it when you actually know, not when you're offering consolation. "I'm not asking you to be finished. I'm asking you to let me be here while you are." The silence that followed was of a different quality than the ones that had come before. Heavier. More honest. "Okay," Lana said. It was the smallest word she had ever given him. It was everything. Chapter 5. The scene at the office. They came home on a Friday. On Monday morning, Desmond Lance was waiting in the lobby. Lana saw him the moment the elevator doors opened. He was standing near the reception desk with his badge visible on his hip and his hands loose at his sides, a posture she recognized, the one that looked relaxed and was not. The receptionist, a young man named Bo who had worked the desk for 8 months and was still learning the landscape of this office, looked between Desmond and Lana with wide eyes and said nothing. "There she is," Desmond said. His voice was warm. It was the warmth of a man performing warmth for an audience, for Bo, for the 2 associates crossing the lobby behind Lana, for the building itself. She had learned this distinction late and at significant cost. "Desmond." She kept walking. Not toward him. Past him. He fell into step beside her, close enough that his arm brushed hers, close enough that it would look incidental. "I've been calling," he said, still warm, still performing. "I know. Lana." He said her name the way a man says a word he owns. "I just want to talk. I don't have anything to say to you. Not here." "Then where?" His voice dropped a register, just below audience range. Because you are not answering at home, and you are not answering your phone, and I know where your mother lives, baby. I know where your sister. The elevator opened and Donte Brown stepped out. He took in the scene in one look. Desmond's body angle, Lana's stillness, the particular quality of a woman holding herself very carefully in the presence of someone she feared, and something closed in his face, all the warmth replaced by a stillness that was, in its own way, as controlled as hers. Mr. Lance, Donte said. He said it with perfect courtesy, perfect calm, perfect weight. I'm going to ask you to step out of this building. Desmond looked at him. The performance flickered. I'm having a conversation with Miss Zelle, Donte said. My senior executive director. In my building. Which she has not given you permission to enter. Step out or I'll have you removed. The lobby had gone quiet. Bo was very still. 2 associates had frozen near the stairwell door. Desmond looked at Donte. Then at Lana. Something moved through his eyes that was not hurt and not anger, but something older and more dangerous than either, the look of a man recalculating. This isn't over, he said. Leave, Donte said. He left. The lobby exhaled. Donte looked at Lana, and she looked back at him, and there was a whole conversation in the 4 feet of space between them, gratitude and something else, something she was not ready to name, something that felt dangerous and necessary at the same time. Are you all right? He asked. I'm fine, she said. Then, thank you. He nodded once. We'll talk tonight. My attorney knows a good security consultant. She looked at him. Donte. Not a request, he said, gently. A suggestion from someone who cares. She held his gaze for a moment, and then looked away, and he watched her walk to her desk and did not stop watching until she sat down, and he was sure she was not going to crumble, and then he went to make some calls. Part 2. The Language of Skin. Chapter 6. Moving in. It was Mac's idea, technically. He brought it up in a security briefing as a practical matter. Lana's apartment building had no doorman. Desmond Lance knew the address, and Brown Meridian senior staff represented both a liability and an asset worth protecting. The guest suite in Donte's Michigan Avenue penthouse, Mac said, reading from a document he had clearly prepared in advance, was large, private, fully equipped, and 26 stories above street level with a doorman. 3 security cameras per elevator bank and biometric access. It would be a temporary measure, Mac said, not meeting Lana's eyes. For safety. Lana sat across the conference table from both of them and considered this proposal with the same methodical attention. She gave everything, looking for the inefficiencies and the vulnerabilities and the 17 things that could go wrong. She found only one, that moving into Donte Brown's home meant navigating everything that was already building between them in much closer proximity. She moved in on a Thursday. The suite was more apartment than guest room. Its own living space, its own bathroom with a deep soaking tub she immediately loved, windows that looked south over the city. She unpacked 2 suitcases while Donte stood in the doorway and asked twice if there was anything she needed, and she said no both times, and he left her to it, which she appreciated more than she said. Living with him was nothing like she had expected and exactly like she should have expected. He was quiet in the mornings, moved through the kitchen with the focused ease of someone who had developed routines and trusted them. He made extraordinary coffee. He read the physical newspaper. He had a habit of leaving architectural sketches on the kitchen counter that were so casually beautiful it made her feel like she was always stumbling onto something private. He did not crowd her. Did not fill the space with conversation or expectation. Was simply there, which was, she was discovering, the most radical thing anyone had offered her in years. Chapter 7. Trip to Dubai. Dubai in the height of summer was an act of architectural defiance, a city that had decided heat was a problem to be engineered around rather than endured, and had done so with extravagance and precision. Their suite at the hotel had a private pool suspended 20 floors above the Gulf, and the light off the water came in bronze and silver at every hour of the day. The meetings were with a sovereign development fund, 2 days of presentations and negotiations that Lana managed with the efficiency of a conductor, moving between the slides and the stakeholders and the logistical details with the ease of someone who had been doing this for 8 years. The fund's lead negotiator, a sharp and watchful man named Jordan Lee, told her afterward that she was the most prepared person he had worked with in recent memory. She told him she would pass the compliment along. He means it for you, Donte said, when she relayed this later in the elevator going up to their floor. He said, the most prepared person on the Brown Meridian team. That's you, Lana. I'm your assistant. You haven't been just my assistant since year 3. He said it plainly, the way he said everything true. I've just been slow with the official title. The elevator opened on their floor. Later, she would mark this moment as one of the ones that mattered. The evening of the second day, they were on the terrace beside the suspended pool, the city burning orange and gold all the way to the horizon, and the conversation had moved through work and through the foundation trip and through things they did not usually talk about. Her family in Atlanta, his in Philadelphia, the things you do not say in conference rooms. She had her feet in the pool and her locks were loose, and she had had exactly 1 glass of wine and the warm air pressed in from all sides like a presence. Come in, she said. He looked at her. The pool, she said. Come in. He set down his glass and removed his shirt in the uncomplicated way of a man who had very little vanity, and she watched this with more attention than was strictly professional and did not look away. He was beautiful. She had known this abstractly, the way you know facts about light, technically, without looking directly at the source, but now she was looking directly at the source, and the fact of him was immediate and real and impossible to abstract. He lowered himself into the water beside her. Neither of them said anything for a while. The city glittered below them. His shoulder was close enough to her shoulder that she could feel the warmth of him without contact. I keep thinking, she said, about what I've been settling for. He waited. Not just with Desmond. With myself. With what I decided I was worth. She turned her head and looked at him directly, the pool light moving across her face in broken patterns. And then I look at you and she stopped. Say it, he said quietly. I feel like I have been standing in a dark room for years, and there has been a window the whole time. He was very still. She shifted in the water and turned toward him, and he turned toward her, and there was very little space between them now, just the warm wet air and the city far below and the truth of 8 years converging to a single point. When he kissed her, it was not the beginning of something. It was the arrival. It was slow and deliberate and full of all the patience he had been practicing, and she kissed him back with all the parts of herself she had been keeping behind glass. And his hands came up and held her face with the specific care of a man who had waited 8 years to touch this particular person and was determined to mean every second of it. They stopped before it became something else. Not because they didn't want to, but because he pulled back and looked at her and said, I want you to want this. All of this. Not just tonight. And she put her forehead against his and breathed him in and said, I know. They floated in the suspended pool above the glittering city for another hour after that, close, warm, not touching, holding the restraint like a promise, and it was the most intimate hour of her adult life. When they returned from Dubai, Desmond was waiting near the parking structure of Donte's building in the early morning dark. He stepped out when he saw them. Lana felt the old freeze response move through her body, the tightening of the chest, the narrowing of the field, and then felt Donte's hand at the small of her back, not controlling, just there, just a warmth that said, I am here. I need to talk to you, Desmond said. He was looking at Lana, but he was also looking at Donte, and then he was looking at where Donte's hand was, and the calculation in his eyes was cold and rapid. Move away from the vehicle, Donte said. I just want to talk to her. Lana. 5 minutes. She doesn't want to talk to you. I'm talking to her, not Desmond. Lana said it clearly, out in the open, loud enough for the parking attendant in the booth 20 feet away to hear. I have nothing to say to you. I'm asking you to leave me alone. I'm asking this clearly, with a witness. Leave me alone. Something broke open in his expression. He grabbed for her arm. Donte moved between them. Not dramatically. Just moved, his body a wall, his voice a low and unmistakable warning. Don't, he said. Desmond's hand dropped. He looked at Donte and Lana and at the parking attendant who was now on the phone, and he did the math of consequences, and he left. We're filing a restraining order tomorrow, Donte said. Yes, Lana said. Tonight you're safe. I know, she said. I know I am. Chapter 8, Trip 3, São Paulo. Brazil had rain that fell the way confessions fall, sudden and total, and with no particular apology. Their suite at the Hotel in Jardins was large and warm and rain-streaked, and the city outside moved in the wet dark like a living thing. The meetings had gone long. A regional infrastructure coalition, an evening with a development NGO whose director, a compact and energetic woman named Sandra Holden, spoke for 2 hours about equitable housing with a passion that could have carried a stadium. Lana had taken 30 pages of notes. Donte had said almost nothing and absorbed everything. They came back to the suite at 11, both wrung out from the particular exhaustion of sustained attention, and the rain was louder now against the windows. Lana kicked off her heels in the entryway. Glass of water, she said. Please. She moved to the kitchen, and he sat on the couch, and for a moment it was like being home. The domestic ease of it, the comfort, the sense of a gravity that had nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with want. She brought 2 glasses and sat beside him, close enough that their knees touched, and neither of them moved away. Lana. She looked at him. And the thing that had been building since Nairobi, since the lobby, since the Dubai pool, since the message at midnight, since 8 years of folded notes in a subterranean language, it arrived. Not rushed. Not careless. With all the intention of a man who had thought about this for years. They moved to the bedroom the way inevitabilities move, slowly, and then all at once. He sat on the edge of the bed and drew her between his knees and looked up at her with an expression so open and so certain that something inside her that had been locked for a very long time simply opened. Tell me what you need, he said. I need, she said, for this to be real. It's real, he said. It has been real for 8 years. She sank her fingers into his hair and tilted his head back and said, then show me. He did. He was thorough in the way he was thorough about everything, with care and attention and the patience of someone who understood that the details were where meaning lived. He took his time learning her the way he had always wanted to, with his hands and his attention and the low particular vocabulary of his voice against her skin. He held nothing back and asked for nothing she wasn't ready to give, and she gave freely, openly, for the first time in longer than she could remember. The rain came down against the windows and the city moved in its wet dark below them, and they stayed in that suite for the rest of the night and into the morning. The bed, the floor with its soft rug, and the city light coming through. The deep tub with the rain audible through the skylight, and each time felt like a new section of a conversation that had been waiting years for a language. At some point near 4 in the morning, she was lying across his chest, and the rain had softened to a whisper, and she said, "This is going to change everything." "Yes," he said. "Are you afraid of that?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, "I'm afraid of what my life looks like if this doesn't happen. The other thing doesn't scare me." She pressed her lips to his shoulder. He pulled her closer. She slept for the first time in months, without listening for threat sounds. She slept deeply and without interruption, and woke to his hand in her hair and the São Paulo sunrise burning gold and orange through the rain-cleaned glass. The investigation into Desmond Lance had begun quietly, opened by a lieutenant in his own district named Joe Bennett, a woman who had watched Desmond's behavior shift over several months with the careful attention of someone who had seen this pattern before. Phone records requested through improper channels. Surveillance footage from a building he had no professional reason to be observing. A restraining order filed by a civilian that matched a half-dozen complaint patterns from the prior 3 years. He did not know about the investigation yet. He was still watching. Still mapping the patterns of her movements, her arrivals, her small orbit inside the city. He was watching more carefully now, with the heightened focus of a man losing his grip, and that was the most dangerous he had ever been. Chapter 9, Trip 4, Amsterdam. By the time Amsterdam came, 3 months after São Paulo, they were not keeping anything from anyone. It was not a decision that had been formally made. It was simply what happened when two people stop performing a distance they no longer feel. The performance ends. They arrived at meetings together and left together and sat beside each other at dinners in the particular proximity that means something. Donte's assistant, his former assistant, now his senior director of international operations with a salary befitting that title, moved through the Amsterdam itinerary with the calm authority of someone who had long since stopped doubting her place in these rooms. The boardroom in their Chicago offices, which was aware the way all boardrooms are aware, had noted the shift. Mac had noted it with a quiet satisfaction he made no effort to conceal. The 3 members of the senior leadership team, Jordan, Vina, and Tage, had, in separate conversations, registered the development and returned to their work. Only one member of the board, an old partner named Hayden Mackle, had made his skepticism known. "I'd like to discuss the optics," he had said, in a tone that meant he would like to register an objection. Donte had said, "I appreciate that, Hayden." "What else?" And Hayden, who had known Donte Brown for 17 years and understood a closed door when he was shown one, had moved on. Amsterdam was canals and gray skies and the particular quiet beauty of a city built on patience, on stilts and consensus and centuries of carefully managed water. Their hotel faced the Keizersgracht, and the canal light moved on the ceiling of their shared room in the early mornings like something breathing. They were openly together now, in that room and in all the rooms they moved through. It was a different kind of intimacy than São Paulo, less urgent, more considered. The intimacy of two people learning each other's dailiness, the small unremarkable rhythms that make a life. He watched her read in the mornings with one knee drawn up and her locks falling over her shoulder and her reading glasses that she pretended she didn't need. She watched him sketch. He always had a notebook and learned the specific quality of his concentration, the way he went somewhere deep and stayed there, the way he came back from it when she said his name. "Donte. What are you building?" He looked at the sketch. "Something for you." She looked at the paper from across the room. "A house? A home?" She took her glasses off and looked at him fully. "Don't rush me," she said. "I'm not," he said. "I'm just thinking ahead." She looked at him for a long moment. He held her gaze without defense. She went back to her book. But she folded the corner of the page she had been on, and she looked at the sketch again before she left the room. What he had decided, without telling her, without telling anyone, lived in the particular quiet of his own certainty. He wanted to bind her to this life. To his life. He knew this was not the right word, was not the right framing, was not the thing a man should do to a woman who was still learning to trust the weight of her own yes. He knew she was not ready. He knew that knowledge had always been the foundation of how he moved with her, carefully, patiently, waiting for her to arrive rather than reaching and pulling. And still, there was a version of himself he could not argue out of the room. A version that looked at everything Desmond had stolen from her, her trust, her safety, her sense of her own solidity, and wanted to replace it with something permanent. Something she could hold. Something that said, "You are wanted and you are mine, and I am not going anywhere," in a language that was not words, because words could always be retracted. He made a decision in Amsterdam. He told himself it was love. He was not entirely wrong. He was also not entirely honest. He made love to her that night with a tenderness that she felt all the way through, the kind that is not performance and not strategy, but something rooted and true. She moved with him and spoke his name and held nothing back, and afterward she lay with her face against his throat and his hand moving slowly through her hair, and she said, "I didn't know it could feel like this." "Like what?" he said. "Safe," she said. "And wanted." At the same time, he pressed his mouth to her forehead. He held the thing he had decided very close. When they returned from Amsterdam, Desmond Lance had a breakdown at the 18th District Station. It began as an argument with his lieutenant, Joe Bennett, when she requested access to his department-issued devices for the internal review. He had refused, and then he had escalated, and then he had said things in a bullpen full of witnesses that were loud enough and specific enough that 4 officers documented them independently. He had said her name. Lana's name. Had said it with the particular ownership of a man who did not understand he had no claim. He was placed on administrative leave that afternoon. Lana received the call from Joe Bennett directly, professional, factual, telling her only what was relevant and what she had a right to know. She listened. She thanked her. She sat in her office for a while after, with the city doing its ordinary thing below her, and she felt something she had not expected to feel. Not relief. Not yet. Something more like a door left open after years of locked. Chapter 10, Trip 5, Cape Town. By Cape Town, she knew. She had been careful with her body in a way she was always careful, had maintained the habits of a woman who had learned not to take her own continuity for granted. And still, somewhere on the Atlantic seaboard of South Africa, with the mountain behind them and the ocean in front of them and 3 weeks since Amsterdam, her body was telling her something she had not asked for. She was very still in the bathroom of their hotel suite for a very long time. Then she came out and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the ocean through the floor-to-ceiling glass and did the math. Amsterdam. She thought about what he had said, I'm thinking ahead, and she thought about the sketch of the house, and she thought about the specific tenderness of that night, which had felt at the time like love and now felt, from this angle, like something else. Something with an intention behind it that had not been named. She sat with this for an hour. Then she called Vera Jo in Nairobi, who was the sharpest person she knew, and said, if a man you loved did something unforgivable because he was afraid of losing you, is it unforgivable? Vera was quiet for 5 seconds. What did he do? I'm not sure yet. I'm asking in advance. Call me when you know for certain, Vera said. And Lana? Your answer to that question is for you to decide. Not me. She waited until the evening. Until they had come back from the day's last meeting and the sun was going down behind the mountain and the hotel suite was full of that particular Cape Town golden hour light that made everything look like something worth keeping. Donte. He looked up from his notebook. She held his gaze. I need you to tell me the truth about Amsterdam. Something moved through his face. Slow and significant. What do you think the truth is? He said. I think, she said, very carefully, that you made a choice I didn't get to make with you. And I think you knew exactly what you were doing. He set the notebook down. She watched him gather himself for honesty the way she had watched him gather himself for difficult negotiations fully, without retreat. I was afraid, he said, of losing you, of you healing and deciding I was part of the wrong world and walking away from all of it. So you decided for me. Yes. The silence was enormous. That is, she said, exactly what he used to do. The words landed. She watched them land. She watched him receive them without deflecting, without defending, with the particular courage of a man who knows he deserves what is being said. I know, he said. And I need you to understand, she said, that I have spent years with a man who made decisions for me. Who decided what I needed without asking. Who thought love was something you do to a person, not with them. Yes. And I am, her voice cracked once and then steadied. I am carrying your child. And you decided that. Without me. He said nothing. There was nothing to say to that. He knew it. She looked at him for a long time. At the man she had worked beside for 8 years, who knew her coffee order and her cold and her confidence, who had put his body between her and harm, who had kissed her in a pool above a glittering city and meant every second of it, who had done something wrong in the name of something true. I'm not leaving, she said finally. He exhaled like he had been holding that breath since Amsterdam. But I need you to understand that staying is my choice. Not something that happened to me. Not something you arranged. Lana. My choice, she said again. Yes, he said. Yours. Completely. She nodded. Then, there are going to be terms. Something close to love moved through his face. Tell me the terms. You ask, she said. From now on, for everything. You tell me the truth and you ask. Not decide. Not arrange. Ask. Agreed. And we go slowly. I need to know you outside of this. Outside of work and crisis and trips and extraordinary circumstances. I need to know you are on a Wednesday. Wednesdays are my best days, he said, and there was something gentle in it, something like the beginning of a language they hadn't invented yet. I'm serious. I am too. She looked at him. The mountain behind the window. The ocean. The gold light. I love you, she said. It was the first time she had said it, and she said it the way she said all true things plainly, without decoration, like a door opened. I've probably loved you for a long time. But love is not enough reason to let someone take choices from me. Not yours. Not anyone's. No, he said. It isn't. She crossed the room and sat beside him and let him take her hand, and they sat with the Cape Town evening coming in around them, the ocean sound through the glass, everything complicated and real and theirs. A baby, he said quietly. Yes. Are you? Ask me in a month, she said. Right now I'm still finding the edge of it. Okay. He squeezed her hand. I'm here. I know, she said. That is the only reason this is a conversation and not an ending. Epilogue, the Wednesday version. The press release went out on a Monday. It was drafted by the communications team, vetted by legal, and approved by the board, by Tage and Vina and Jordan and even, eventually, Hayden Mackle, who had requested one final meeting with Donte and said, she's the best thing that's happened to this company. I just needed to make sure she knows it. Ask her yourself, Donte had said. Hayden had. The release announced the formal elevation of Lana Zelle to executive vice president and partner of Brown Meridian Group, and noted, in the final paragraph, that Mr. Brown and Ms. Zelle were expecting their first child, whom the company hoped would one day contribute to the ongoing and extraordinary work of the firm. Mac read this last part and quietly pumped his fist under his desk. Bo at reception received 12 calls that day about the announcement and answered all of them with practiced neutrality and texted his friend Joe from college that he worked at the most interesting office in Chicago. Desmond Lance was in county detention pending the outcome of an internal affairs hearing and 2 separate investigations, one of them involving the misuse of departmental resources. Joe Bennett had made sure the file was complete. She was thorough about such things. Lana did not read the press release on the day it went out. She was at home, in the Michigan Avenue apartment that she had moved into as a convenience and had not moved out of, because it turned out the city looked different from 26 floors up than it did from the inside of a fear she had been living in. And she wanted to keep looking at it this way for a while. She was at home on the couch with her reading glasses and a book, her locks loose, her feet up, the city doing its Wednesday thing in the windows around her. Donte came home at 6:15. He set his portfolio down. He made 2 glasses of water and brought one to her without being asked. He looked at her on the couch in the window light, and something moved through his face, not the controlled executive expression, not the conference table composure, just a man looking at a woman he loved in his home on a Wednesday, lit up by it. "How was your day?" he said. "Good," she said. She looked up from her book. "How was yours?" "Good," he said. "Better now." She looked at him for a moment. Then she moved over and made space beside her, and he sat down, and she put her feet in his lap, and he picked up the book she had finished last week off the table and opened it. They sat in the window light and read and did not talk for a long time, and the city carried on below them, indifferent and enormous, while between them the small and radical work of 2 people learning each other on a Wednesday went on, patient and real and chosen. Exactly as it should be. End.